Good afternoon, dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor and my privilege to welcome you to today's conversation, and I will moderate it. My name is Yelena Sokova. I'm the Executive Director of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non Proliferation. But today's conversation will involve two distinguished guests, the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi and Charles Oppenheimer, founder of the Oppenheimer Project and the grandson of Robert Oppenheimer. A conversation about nuclear weapons legacy, current nuclear threats, is as relevant today as ever. At the same time, we see a remarkable interest and enthusiasm about nuclear power and energy. And when I learned that Charles Oppenheimer is going to be in town, I thought it's a great opportunity to have this conversation. And I'm really grateful that both Charles and Director General Grossi accepted that invitation. I'm sure we'll have an exciting conversation. A few logistical points before we move on. First, we will proceed with a set of questions that I will pose to them. There will be several rounds. And afterwards, we'll open the floor to the questions from the audience. The event is being recorded. You will see the two cameras here. What I would appreciate is that if you will get up or for a question or you have to leave, please don't walk in front of the cameras. We want to have a good recording available. Also, I'm told that the microphones are very sensitive, so we would appreciate if there is little background noise as we're doing our event. Okay, moving on. I thought we would start first looking at the nuclear legacy and current nuclear threats. And nowadays, some say that the risk and threats posed by nuclear weapons as high, if not higher, than during the Cold War. We live in the era of geopolitical rivalry and strategic competition. All countries that already possess nuclear weapons are either modernizing them or growing their arsenals, or both in some cases. There are also serious concerns that other countries may develop nuclear weapons of their own. Robert Oppenheimer and other scientists who were involved in the Manhattan Project warned about these developments. They foresaw that this is likely where we end up. And they really focused and proposed to have international control of nuclear energy and concentration of all nuclear operations in one authority. In addition to just that control and concentration of all nuclear materials, facilities, operations, they also suggested that these authorities should be also the one focused on nuclear science and also on the peaceful application of nuclear energy. So this kind of a dual nature of nuclear materials, nuclear energy, obviously was known from the very start. Given the current geopolitical situation, I'm going to pose the first question to you, Director General. What impact the current geopolitical context has on the IAEA mission to pursue both of this core function, guarding against the proliferation of nuclear weapons and also pursuing atoms for peace?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the idea, the invitation. It's great to be together. We had a short meeting this morning, and we were, I think, both looking forward to continuing here in front of you. And of course, to you and VCDNP for always preparing interesting things for us and for the community. Yeah, you were saying in your introduction something which is fundamentally true. At a time of increased geopolitical tension, there will be, and it's natural, there will be, in some of the conflicts, not in all of them, there will be a nuclear dimension, where by implication or directly, the fact that we have nuclear weapons is going to be present. Implicitly, tacitly, sometimes even mentioned, but always as part of the background. That cannot be forgotten. So when it comes to, and that is, of course, that could be analyzed in its own merits, why this is happening and what is being said or not, how appropriate or inappropriate this is. But this is another discussion. When it comes to us, when it comes to our mission, I believe that the main preoccupation that we have at this point, and without adding to this a value judgment, is that we need to recognize that the attraction of nuclear weapons is increasing. So we have to admit that more and more countries are talking about nuclear weapons in a, if I can use the word, disarmingly open way. They do. They say, you know, and I'm talking about, for diplomatic reasons, I will not mention them, but I could, because this has been said publicly by many. You know, in the current circumstances, perhaps we should revise our policies, or why are we without nuclear weapons, or maybe the evolving scenario in the world should make us think that we should have nuclear weapons, or why did we relinquish the nuclear weapons we had, etc., etc., etc. You can put the names on the phrases I have just said. All right, so for us, that means that the non-proliferation system that we have is under considerable stress, is under serious stress. And we are the ones who should be trying, at least, to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons from this perspective. So yeah, that affects the mission and the way in which we do our work, which has a number of manifestations. How do we safeguard? What kind of approach we have? And for those, and there are many here, experts, practitioners, even I see, that are part of the debate. And we all know that the agency has been trying in different ways to have a system that is adapted to this kind of evolving situation, given the limitations that the safeguards system has, which, again, there's no value judgment here. It's only a description that we are not seeing everything, that there are certain areas where we can see, some others where we are not supposed to. And of course, we have to, as always, in the IAEA, we have to have approaches that are accepted by all. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So that is one area. Non-proliferation regime under stress. The need for us to be up to the challenge. On the other hand, there is the issue, and it's a huge one, and I suppose we will be tackling it from different angles, when we do the promotional work that we are supposed to be doing as per our statute. Once somebody asked me, why are you promoting so much nuclear energy? Well, read the statute of the agency I propose to run one day. So we are promoting, yes, we are promoting. We're very proud of promoting the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. And of course, that happens against the background of all these situations. But look at this, and this is very interesting. we are seeing this scenario, which is complex. The discussion about nuclear weapons, the war in Europe, etc., etc., etc. And that does not affect the intensity of the interest in nuclear energy. More and more countries want nuclear energy. More and more countries are working with us on things that have nothing to do with weapons, of course. They want our support. They want our advice. They want our guidance, capacity building, etc., etc., etc. In confirmed nuclear users, and importantly, in many developing countries that are coming to us. And let me tell you that in all of those discussions, the issue of the nuclear weapons, as it should be, never comes up. Never comes up, because countries in good standing with their obligations are not planning to have a nuclear power plant to develop a nuclear weapon. And I would stay.
We'll return to the, thank you, to the nuclear energy interest in separate round.
Yeah.
But since you mentioned the non-proliferation under stress, and the IAEA is charged with safeguarding and the whole system of safeguards, what are the key priorities areas and the challenges that the maintenance and strengthening of the safeguards the agencies facing?
Priorities for the safeguards?
For the safeguards.
Well, to do the job it's supposed to be doing. This is, it's not easy. It's not easy. We have a system that has limitations, and we need to adapt it, first of all, horizontally, because the field, the inspectable field is growing, and we know that it will be growing. And this horizontal dimension is compounded with new nuclear, new technologies. Modularity brings into nuclear different ways to inspect nuclear material. Nuclear naval propulsion brings new ways and needs and requirements, so that we can give the world the guarantees that nuclear naval propulsion, and please don't think that I'm only thinking about nuclear subs. I'm thinking about areas where the agency is now engaging very actively with the shipping industry. We have a project called Atlas. We are working with ports. We are working with shipping companies because in 50 years, a considerable part of the shipping of the ships and naval merchant fleet in the world is going to be powered by nuclear reactors. So all of this is already, these people, and I must say that this is something that has come to us from the private sector. They came to us, hey, what can we do about this? And we are working with the International Maritime Organization in London and with the insurers and other companies. So all of this means that safeguards and the safeguard community and the safeguard experts and technologies, etc., will have to adapt, which is absolutely normal. I don't see this as a crisis. I see this as a normal consequence of the fact that we are checking something which is technology-based, and technology evolves. So it's only natural that in 2037, we are not going to be doing safeguards like in 1977. All right? So it has to be different. It will be different. So this is, in that sense, I see the need for the evolution of the safeguards practice and regime.
Sounds good. We'll move on now to Charles Oppenheimer, to you. Well, not everybody is familiar with the Oppenheimer Project, so maybe we'll start with you introducing it a little bit, say a few words, and the role for it as you see it.
So thanks so much for having me, Director General and guests. I started the Oppenheimer Project after many years of the family. We have a tradition of not putting our hands up and talking about my grandfather's philosophy. have had authors do it, movies, operas. There's so much public attention on our family, but we had kind of a bit of a cultural tradition of not, I, for example, grew up in my lifetime, would never walk into a room and say, I'm related to Robert Oppenheimer. So this is a whole new phase. But about 5 years ago, I worked with the Department of Energy in the United States, who was naming a department called the Oppenheimer Science and Leadership Program. And they reached out to the family to ask the name and asked for permission to use the name. And my father heard that request and said, they make nuclear weapons, no. And I said, who are you guys? Let's talk. It was, and I learned more about the Department of Energy and heard more about the program that they were trying to promote, which in their percentage of their budget that goes to weapons versus energy, and it ended up giving them tacit permission, not explicit, but said, hey, if you name a program. So that background of saying that we in the family should have some representation of our family's values and my grandfather's values in particular, because they're so important, I think, in today's world. And this was, of course, before the movie came out, and most people in this room perhaps knew about Robert Oppenheimer and his history, but a lot of my peers, for example, at work didn't know who he is. And I think that's the main thing that I've been able to bring forward is, can we learn from those lessons of the past? You know, Robert Oppenheimer and his peers saw what to do with nuclear energy, and they kind of delivered it to politicians, that this is exactly what could happen. It strikes me how prescient their advice was. They said that we would never get safety from making new nuclear weapons. And this was on August 17th, 1945, that they would always pose a threat to the world, no matter what direction. And the only possible solution to that was cooperation around that. So I feel like the mission of not just talking about those potential threats, but the upside and the power of using nuclear power and the medical applications is really integral for us to move beyond this thing that we're stuck with, which is unfortunately more difficult than what Robert Oppenheimer was dealt with. It was very hard at that time, right after the war, but he knew what to do. And there was the prescription of the Acheson-Lilienthal plan, which was the centralized control. And historians have looked at it and said that actually would work. And we now, with the IAEA, have the evolution of that, of dealing with it after you have an arms race. And it's so much more difficult, and you need so much more of an ongoing institution. But in the end, it all comes down to human interactions, not technical things. And that's something that my grandfather talked about a lot, that it's not the technology decisions, but the ability to talk about this. So that's the main thing we try to concentrate on.
Great points. You know, when I was planning the event and reaching out to you and to Director General Grossi, I actually reread the Acheson-Lilienthal report. And I was like, oh my goodness, I wish somebody had really took it seriously and forward. But anyway, I'm deviating a little bit, and I will be probably, you got used to it, make reference to the movie.
Yes. I'll accept movie questions.
Yes. By the way, I really enjoyed the movie. It's great. Yeah. But when Cillian Murphy, the actor who portrayed your grandfather in the movie, accepted his Academy Award for the Best Actor, he said, for better or for worse, we're all living in Oppenheimer's world. Suppose he's right, and we're all living in your grandfather's world. Is it the world your grandfather anticipated? And if different, in what way?
So, you know, there was such a great hope with a scientist, particularly Bohr, kind of levying my grandfather's spirits during the war. He was doing this terrible duty as a soldier, effectively, in a war. He knew what he was doing. He knew what the effect would be. And they'd hoped that the effect would be the end of war itself. It wasn't just, let's get rid of atomic weapons, but that is really what they wanted out of it, that through this experience of bringing nuclear weapons into the world, they said, we can't possibly have the same relations between nations. It changes things fundamentally. And I do believe that is the world we're living in. We as a percentage of violence in human interactions, it's lower than it ever has been in humanity. And as the threats escalate, when we have enemies, for example, in the US, everybody will tell you the Chinese are our enemies and they're terrible people. And daily we trade billions of dollars in interactions and flights and money. So it really has changed war and the ability to have war. And I don't think that the institutions of the world, particularly the military institutions and the budgets, have adapted to that. It's philosophically true that we can't have a war, but you kind of put budgetary efforts into things that are closer to a proxy war. That's not a true and total war. So it's not the way he would have wanted it to happen, but I think in some way we've ended up closer to where we need to be, which in this next phase is going to be the most important time in the world. Can we get through this tripolar, unstable period and survive it and come out on the other side?
Yeah, that is important distinctions, but given that he also is really adamant to pursue international cooperation and peace. And that's very much translated not only through like Acheson Lilienthal report and many speeches that he gave and writings. He expressed really a big concern about arms race first, but if we don't pursue nuclear energy in a peaceful and cooperative way, what lessons from his legacy you would draw from today?
Well, he was not actually a huge proponent of nuclear energy himself. He said if we do not have the right level of cooperation, we would fail to take advantages of the power and the potential at that point. He didn't know exactly what it would be. And of course, he was completely right about that. Unfortunately, we've ended up with 10,000 nuclear weapons and 450 nuclear power plants. And to this day, a vast majority of people, including politicians, will pass a budget for nuclear weapons and outlaw nuclear energy. So it really got conflated in the public's mind on a scientific basis. I think we need to pull hope from where we can get it. And my backing of nuclear energy is because I believe it can be a more natural bridge builder than sitting down and saying, okay, let's get rid of weapons. Everybody can just say, they can't do that. You can't trust the Russians. You can't trust the Americans. It's just like a non-starter. But if you start with something positive, that we agree we need more power together, we agree there should be more developing energy and abundance in the earth, there's a part that we can get together on the positive uses that could be a bridge builder to the places we need to do on the really difficult thing.
That's a great segue to the next round of questions, actually focused on the nuclear energy and peaceful uses of the atom. And as we all know who work here in Vienna, that nuclear energy is gaining a new momentum and a lot of enthusiasm about the potential expansion of nuclear energy, nuclear power, with small modular reactors, other advanced technology. At COP28, there was a declaration about the intent to triple nuclear energy production by 2050. And now 31 countries have signed on to it. That's a dramatic increase in global nuclear power. And it will also present quite a bit of challenges and opportunities, both to the IAEA, but also to the civil society, including to ensure that it remains peaceful. So, Director General Grossi, Rafael, if I may.
Of course.
How is nuclear energy's new momentum impacting the agency, first? And I would say this is not the first time that we hear about a potential nuclear renaissance.
Right.
What is different this time around?
A lot. Let me start. Well, first of all, what we are seeing, and you are absolutely right, there was in the 1990s talk about nuclear renaissance. This is why I don't like to talk about renaissance. I like to refer to a return to realism rather to a renaissance. First of all, I think you were referring to the COP, and you're referring to this tripling declaration. There were 30 countries that said that, but there were 190 that said that nuclear should be accelerated side by side with renewables. And that, for me, is much more important than 30 countries saying they are tripling. Kudos to those who are tripling, and we are with them and working with them. But what we are seeing is a new international consensus where there was none before. Now, every country, including those who do not use or like nuclear energy, recognize that it is technically and scientifically obvious that if you are going to get to a decarbonized international energy matrix, you cannot do it without nuclear. So, and this is not the nuclear lobby or the nuclear whatever, is the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, is the International Energy Agency, people who do not have any nuclear or atomic in their acronym or name, all right? So this is a thing. We have this problem. We can deal with it in many different ways. I don't want to get into that now. It is a very fascinating discussion, how we do it, but we know that nuclear has a part of it. It's not the panacea, it's not for everybody, etc., but it has to be part of it. So first difference. Second difference is the difference with the previous nuclear so-called renaissances. Second thing, we have a big issue around what is called now the energy security debate, which did not exist before. Energy security debate. This means that countries are assessing what are the tools that they may have to ensure their energy needs in a way they can control and do not generate perhaps unwanted dependencies. This is very clear, for example, in Central and Eastern Europe and in other parts of the world as well. So they see the degree of autonomy that nuclear energy gives a country in terms of what it does or what it does not in balancing its energy mix. More of this, less of that, but nuclear, I am in control. I'm not depending on something coming from somewhere else, all right, to do and to have my basic needs in terms of energy. So first, we said the global warming, the climate change debate, then the energy security thing. Then I believe there is something very, very important, which is the technology evolution that we are seeing. I say this with prudence, because it is not the case that small modular reactors are going to replace the traditional nuclear fleet, or type of nuclear engineering that we have, which will continue to be the basic and the most of the existing and future fleets. For those who read our documents, you may have seen that in our own, others have other projections, but they are similar, let's say. In our own projection, in a optimistic projection, SMRs in a few years will be making for perhaps 20% of the fleet, in a less optimistic between 6 and 8%. The rest being more built long-term operation of the existing fleet. That is the third. And let me add a fourth, which I believe is very important, and it never happened before. Never. For the first time, you have demand-driven nuclear energy. For the first time, the private sector is asking for nuclear. This never happened before. You have AI high-tech, and hardly a week passes without, with a new agreement, Meta, Amazon, Google, blah, blah, blah. Every company recognizes and is demanding, and frankly speaking, the nuclear industry is under a lot of pressure to deliver what is being expected from it. And it's not only AIs and data centers and high tech. As I was saying, is the shipping industry, is the steel. For the first time, I'm having meetings with the World Steel Association. What is the IAEA doing with these guys? So we can see more and more sectors that are looking at nuclear. So these are 4. There may be others, but definitely you will agree with me that it's different from the last time around.
Very convincing. But is the agency prepared for that anticipated, both in terms of
absolutely
verification and other services?
As I was saying, the agency, in this sense, I mean, it's present in all fronts. In all fronts. First, of course, is the non-proliferation mission. We have to make sure that these new reactors, that this new activity does not generate any proliferation concern. And we are already perfecting our safeguards capabilities. We are introducing AI. Of course, we are introducing more automation. We are making sure, and for the ambassadors in the room, you can be reassured, we are not going to be asking for big budget increases.
I think they took note.
Well, I should take note of what they say, I believe. And it's the other way around. They are the owners of the agency. So, listen. So this is one thing. We have the ways and the methodologies and the systems that can adapt to more activity. At the same time, and I think this is very important, we are giving the capacity building and the training that many countries, in particular developing countries, need, and they are requiring because they also want to benefit from it. In particular, we will see what happens in terms of the rollout of SMRs, but I say weekly, lots of requests from many developing countries that are looking at SMRs, for example, because they see, it's obvious, they see interest in the modularity, they see the affordability, and all of these things are incredibly attractive for developing countries, and it's very important. We are also working very, very hard on regulatory harmonization. This is incredibly important, and we have, I don't want to get into too much bureaucratic things of the agency, but we have specific projects and initiatives that are trying to bring all the regulators together, because one thing is for sure, much as we need to adapt, safeguards need to adapt, the agency needs to adapt, regulators must adapt. And it is obvious that with a system that licenses a nuclear power plant over 5 years, the SMR industry is not going to exist. It cannot. This is difficult because when it comes to nuclear regulation, national competences are very, very strongly ingrained, and it's very difficult to have, for example, leveraging, the kind of leveraging that you have in commercial aviation or other industries where turbine or it's good if Boeing is buying it, Airbus is producing the same thing, the Russians and the Chinese and the Brazilians, all those who are fabricating aircraft more or less adapt and they take it. So for us to get to that point would be extremely ambitious. But there is a long way into leveraging other regulators' views and other regulators' experiences so that you can have a more dynamic licensing system. It's a difficult thing, but we are working on that. So as you can see, technology, safeguards, promotion for developing countries, capacity building, regulators, and also industrial standardization. This is another challenge. We are talking a lot. I mean, and my approach has been from the very beginning to embrace industry, to talk to them, to talk to CEOs, to invite them to meetings, to ask them to invite me to talk to them so that I can understand better what they are trying to do, and also to promote these degrees of standardization that are absolutely necessary if we are going to have a supply chain that is in a position to sustain all this effort.
It's a lot of different things to keep in mind.
A lot.
Easy, right?
But I also want to kind of note your general approach to engaging different stakeholders in this conversation. You already mentioned the industry, but also various financial institutions, development agency. I want to ask you specifically, since we have here a representative from a foundation, also civil society, how do you see the role of the philanthropic organizations, the civil society, experts, and their contribution to make this easier for, not easier, but at least assist or contribute to the IAEA missions and overall the peaceful uses of energy?
Their role is self-evident. I think we need civil society in all its forms and manifestations to be involved. By the way, stay tuned. Next year we are going to have the first international conference of nuclear stakeholders. I call it the nuclear communities. Nuclear communities. And we were discussing this morning, conference where we are bringing all those whose life is benefited, affected, or influenced by nuclear. Communities, municipalities, groups, economists, the press. I mean, all those NGOs, philanthropists, importantly, and this is a big chapter that perhaps I could have mentioned in your previous question, international financing institutions, which have been opposed to nuclear energy. Opposed. So you have banks that say, we finance everything but nuclear. So it's written. All right. So I opened these dialogues with them. I was, for the first time, the Director General of the IAEA was talking to the board of the World Bank, and the president of the World Bank was telling me, I mean, yeah, you know, what is the scientific, technological reason to? It doesn't mean that you are going to be obliged or forced to finance anything, but why this discrimination? Well, it's years of a narrative which has no scientific reason to exist. You remember for the Europeans in the room, the taxonomy in Europe, when, because of all these political debates, in all their wisdom, the Commission asked the elite of European scientists, the JRC, to look into this, and the conclusion was, yeah, frankly, there is no scientific difference, technological difference to exclude nuclear energy. So I think that debate is over. There will always be people who will not like nuclear energy. It's a free world, no problem. But let's not construct a narrative based on a flawed logic. So the stakeholder thing, as I see it, is a inclusive discussion that we should have with everybody, from municipalities to those who are, you know, for example, when I was in Onkalo in Finland, where they have the first deep geological repository, which exists. It is there. Before, these things were a PowerPoint presentation, and people would say, "Yeah, that's fancy," etc. Well, now you have it there, and there is the whole community that is, so excited about that. Or in Sweden, where 2 towns were fighting fiercely to get the site of the deep geological repository. until one got it, because they know the jobs it brings, because they know, etc. And this is why I want to bring these nuclear communities, because what you will see, and for those like myself, spend much of their time visiting nuclear power plants from the north to the south, east and west, you will see that the first communities that are very happy with a nuclear power plant is the municipalities where a nuclear power plant is. First of all, they never grew a third eye. Secondly, there are lots of jobs. They have schools. I mean, there's a community. It's a community of people, thousands of families, well-paid jobs, engineers. Certainly, and I'm all pro renewables. We love them. We have to have more. They are cheap. They are fantastic. But we want all. But when it comes to the human dimension, let me compare a nuclear power plant with thousands of families living with that, with a field of photovoltaic, and where's the human there? So when we talk about or windmills, so very good, very, very necessary and important. But I think we need to have the courage of thinking of implications, impacts, and good externalities that come with nuclear energy.
I like the term nuclear communities. We'll return to the role of philanthropy, other stakeholders, civil society in the question to you, Charles. But I first want to return back a little bit into the conversation about the future of nuclear energy and what we're experiencing now, including that enthusiasm about it. How does it correspond to your grandfather's thinking or your personal views on this subject?
Well, of course, I echo most of the points made about COP28, which I was there, and then I had the honor of going to the Brussels follow-up with the IAEA this spring. I moved, maybe like some in this crowd, or probably very relatable to many people, as I grew up thinking nuclear weapons are really bad. I have a personal duty to try to get rid of them, or a family duty, and therefore nuclear energy is also bad. That was just my extrapolation. Read it in the news, bad, dirty, kills people. And I went through an experience of looking into it once I got much more worried about climate change and said, could nuclear energy be a solution? It was so far off the reality that from the news story that I'd heard. And I think that's what has generally happened around the world, is that we had this kind of prejudiced version of how bad nuclear weapons are, therefore energy is bad. So that's something that's happened to a lot of people. The popular support in the US moved from maybe 30–40% of nuclear energy to now over 70%, and all the business communities that you spoke of and what we saw with international cooperation, international support. I will note in Brussels, almost every world leader who got up there and said, we are now committed to tripling nuclear energy, and we need to figure out how to finance it. So that is really the main question about it, is the practical side of making it happen in a way that works for business, for communities, for governments. And when Rafael was going through the discussion about does it lead to proliferation change, it crossed through my mind that those are productive, cooperative discussions. There's nobody out in the world trying to create a nuclear energy plant as a hidden way to make bombs. The more framework that we have about that, about are you making energy, are you open to where your fissile material comes from, that is a network of cooperation that in some way leaves the door open for more cooperation for the thing that really kills us, which is making weapons. And weapons, you don't leave yourself open to those inspections. You don't have a framework of cooperation, and you do it as a sense of conflict. So I think that there is a common theme that the more production of nuclear energy, the more cooperation around it, the better. And with the philanthropic and business communities, we've focused in the foundation on 2 areas, which I'd happy to go into. I think it's your follow-up question, but I'll just keep going.
Yeah, please go. Since I already alluded to it. Yeah.
So, one of the top things is speaking to the philanthropic community, especially climate funders, where there's about $10 billion of climate impact funding in the world. A lot of it comes out of Silicon Valley, where I'm from, and the funders really want to make a difference, the biggest difference in the world. It's common to quit your tech job, you're a millionaire, now let me do something important. I'll take care of the climate, something that really matters. And out of that whole discussion and the whole funding framework, almost none of it goes to nuclear energy, because that was considered the bad stuff that doesn't work. And that is the thing that needs to change. We've been running dialogues with philanthropies and saying, hey, there's some people who fund this already. It's not as bad as you think. Meet up with your peers and discuss how you can make a difference. So that's kind of one narrow area, but it could make a huge difference if in the scope of the leading edge of it. And the other thing that I see is echoing the tech company demand. The reason those companies are making such a big difference is they really believe in carbon-free power, and they're willing to pay for it. The 4 largest tech companies have a market capitalization of $8 trillion, which is enormous. The power sector of United States, all the utility companies added up together is $1 trillion. So the tech companies have more and growing influence. They are saying that they want carbon-free 24/7 energy. They were very formative in funding renewable growth, where they would pay extra money for renewable growth, and they cannot get to their carbon targets without nuclear energy. So that really is a feedback loop where we don't necessarily have a way to finance and fund nuclear energy without tech and AI. And if they do it, it could help create the whole cycle that makes it doable for the world. So I'll agree that this, it's not a renaissance anymore. I was trying to say a spring, nuclear energy spring. We have more hope. But there is a huge delta in the hope and the rhetoric around us tripling and the actual building of new power plants. So in the US, there's 50, 100 SMR companies, and there's no new SMRs being built right now. So that's the mode that we're in. We need to have some Manhattan Project style energy, if I may.
Maybe let's use a different name.
It's got
Well, that's great, and I think that dialogue with the philanthropists is very needed. But what are the other forms of engagement your foundation, the Oppenheimer Project, has, including with the civil society?
Sure. Well, a lot of the funders for non-proliferation needs kind of lost hope with that. You look at it, there was a certain amount of philanthropic funding for peace and security, and some of those funders, after putting 10 or 20 years in it, didn't get there. So they felt like, well, my funding is not making a difference. This is such a big system and it's so intractable. Luckily, we have the IAEA and institutions like it that have steady budget. That's one category. I've been focusing a lot in the same type of framework with financial institutions, institutional funders, people who need their money back, and they need to look at investments in nuclear energy as something that's profitable, and in combination with government support, tax programs, public-private partnership, if you can set up an investment for private companies that will get their money back, that can create a much, much larger pool of funding than any one country can put into it. But I'd like to see the most influential people in the world, which these days tend to be a lot of billionaires running around now influencing in elections, having a feeling that they could make a difference in world peace, this most important thing. There's nothing more important in the world than this question of whether we blow ourselves up with nuclear weapons or get to a future that's incredible, energy abundant, and has a huge amount of carbon-free energy. And so I carry on a small, campaign with my friends in Silicon Valley saying you could make a difference in the most important things, not just the politically correct type of charities that sometimes are backed.
That's a very important connection to some of this tech industry. And obviously, it's already been mentioned that some of these tech companies are seeking and looking into using nuclear power to power like data centers for AI purposes. But I want to bring into conversation a little bit of a different side of the AI discussion, artificial intelligence. Some people see the artificial intelligence as another technological breakthrough on par with or similar to a certain degree to nuclear weapons. And we've heard about the concerns about this fast development of artificial intelligence. Some even suggested that we need an agency like the IAEA to regulate artificial intelligence. Many experts who work in our field are also very concerned about the intersection of artificial intelligence and nuclear weapons, for example, particularly when it comes to command, control, and communication. But others are also seeing opportunities and challenges with the incorporation of artificial intelligence into various parts of the civilian nuclear operations. So what are your thoughts on these issues, both on the AI and its regulation, but also on the incorporation of AI into various nuclear domains? Rafael, may I ask you with you?
I think I mentioned already that that AI has been used and applied for quite some time, I must say, not only at the agency but elsewhere. For us, we see it as an indispensable technological instrument that allows us to do more in a more efficient way. Avoiding tasks and processes that will otherwise take longer and might be prone to mistake. So I see it definitely as a very positive influence. I think when one sees in the public domain discussions about the dangers is, of course, at least in the military field, when you talk about autonomous systems and things like that, that have very little to do with what we are doing. So in our case, AI is a net positive. Is a net positive. When it comes to regulation, it's curious. I have the privilege as head of the IAEA to participate in these meetings led by the Secretary General with all the UN heads or leaders of international organizations. And there have been a few sessions where this issue was discussed, and there has been this reference to the IAEA being a model. I think the applicability of what we do, which is based on nuclear material when it comes to safeguards and to widely accepted safety standards in the area of safety, etc., is as far is quite different from the kind of subject or object of inspection and control that AI would mean. I think that what people may have in mind when they talk about the IAEA is that they see that there is one agency that works, controlling something which may be difficult. Mm-hmm. And this is what I've seen in these discussions. Well, how do you do it? I mean, for those who do not know nuclear, it is intriguing. Mm-hmm. So you have to explain how this is done. My impression is that regulation, and I think that this debate has advanced enough, in order for us to know that we are not going to have an international AI regulation system, and I think it's a good thing that we do not have that, because this kind of activity is extremely difficult to seize, and what you really don't want is an illusion of checks when you are not really checking that. That even reminded me, as a non-proliferation practitioner for 40 years, of some of the discussions we had around biological weapons, and whether the whole thing was verifiable in a way that would give you sufficient assurance or reassurance that you are really checking what needs to be checked, and somebody in a refrigerator somewhere in a distant place would be having, a pathogen that could spread bioterror in any case. So I think some regulation is necessary, but I'm skeptical about although I'm flattered where they say that the IAEA can be a model. It is a model for many things, but perhaps not for that.
Sounds good. How about your views on that, Charles?
So I've been forced to talk about AI over the last year or two because, while there's strong technical dissimilarities, the proliferation concern, the very plan that my grandfather had around controlling fissionable material was possible because it takes so much energy and refinement, and you actually had something to control, and everybody recognizes with AI that it's not controllable fundamentally in that way. So it's better to recognize reality in that sense. But that question of, are we doing something in humanity that is going to then come back and bite us, is one of the world's oldest myths, right? It's the oldest story that all cultures have, effectively. It's Adam and Eve, and it's Prometheus, and it's happened over and over, and there's a reason for that, and that we come up with the same question again. And Robert Oppenheimer and the experience in generally bringing fission into the world changed the world. And we know that there's some element of that happening with AI. And how do we deal with that? The right way is acceptance. Don't pretend that it's something that it's not, or that you could stop. The other thread that I do find that is common is the way to deal with threats that may arise out of that is not exactly the technical prescription and the regulatory regime, but the ability to talk to somebody on the other side, your potential enemy, find those areas of common ground. And of course, it's hard to come up with hope right now with the world the way it is, but I've done it. And so I think with AI in particular, you could get a little bit of thread of cooperation with the most uneasy parties of the world, and say, we agree on nothing other than we don't want an automated, accidental nuclear war driven by AI machines. Let's agree on that. Nothing else. And so there could be small elements where there's a little more dialogue coming out of this technological change that we're all going through right now.
At least some hope in some areas. But I want to make sure we have enough time for questions from the audience. And I'll pose each one of you the last question from this round. And to Rafael, we talked quite a bit about non-proliferation, safeguards, about the nuclear energy renaissance and some of the challenges, AI. What are other issues that are on your agenda? What are the key other concerns or challenges that the agency and you are grappling with?
Is there anything else?
There's a huge one.
Okay.
There's a huge one that has to do with bringing what nuclear technology can do to improve the lives of people, apart from energy. It has to do with bringing radiotherapy services to people who do not have it. It's obscene that in Africa you have more than 30 countries that do not have a single radiotherapy unit, and people die like they die. It is horrible that we have tons and billions of dollars and euros that go to rot in food because we do not have access to irradiation that could multiply and preserve the wealth of developing countries. It is amazing what we can do. And today is a bad day because in the sense that the negotiations on a convention on controlling plastic is in a very difficult phase. And the IAEA has been working not on that because that is the politics and is for countries to fight each other with each other about that, but through nuclear technologies we can do so much in this area, or to prevent pandemics and so on. So my struggle, and I'm still struggling, is to get the confidence of the donor community and our member states as well, that continue to put us in a box that has the name non-proliferation in it, and rightly so. And I love to be called the nuclear watchdog. You know, some people said, no, it's not. Yeah, I like to be called a watchdog. I don't want people to have nuclear weapons and be worried about being caught in the act of doing that. But so much that we can do. The needs are so tremendously big, and so far I am not succeeding in convincing the donor community to trust us and to give us the amount of funds that is already there, because we are not asking for more money. We see that billions, actually billions, are allotted to cancer or to health in Africa. But then I go to Congo and there is no single radiotherapy unit. And this has allowed me to be a little bit disrespectful with important presidents and say, listen, in Europe you are putting all this money there, but I go to Congo and I don't see anything there. Nothing. Where is that money? Why don't you give me 30 million? It's all that costs to have a radiotherapy hospital in Congo. Luckily, you know who gave me that money? The OPEC fund. You know, I went to these guys and they said, it's a good project. It's a good project. And then we are actually building this. And this you can multiply in many different areas and technologies and all of that. So all of these things are not good to haves. For me, is essential and part of the Atoms for Peace, idea. And I think this idea, even in the generation of your grandfather, that was clear, that the science of nuclear could be put to good use to improve lives. But as I say, I'm not getting the results much as I would like to say, I'm great in doing this. Apparently I'm not, because I'm not convincing people on things that for me are no-brainers. But I will keep pushing.
Thank you. And, we talked earlier about the role of civil society and philanthropies. And I think that's probably one of the areas where also they could do really join forces and assist you. I'm kind of doing a little bit of a promotion of the work of the center. I know that Ingrid and others have done some tremendous...
Great job in promoting what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Yeah. But before we open the floor, Charles, the last question to you. And again, I cannot but mention the movie. The movie was a very kind of exciting moment for many people to really learn about the Manhattan Project, about Robert Oppenheimer himself, about nuclear weapons and some of the issues around it. It was a big hit. I know that even some of the younger generation folks went to see it, sometimes several times. And it generated a lot of conversations and discussions. But I kind of feel that the momentum is now declining a little bit. How would you sustain that momentum? How would you continue that conversation and have more public engagement and civil society in that.
Yeah, well, I always say the Oscars are over, but I'm going to be an Oppenheimer for the rest of my life, so that's what I'm stuck with. You know, we didn't have much control or input of the movie. I talked to Nolan and went to the movie sets, but that's something that happens when you're related to fame and history. You don't have control over it. Other people say what they say. But I was really pleased with the result that he had. Like you said, it hit a time that opened people's eyes to this, and it was right around the Ukraine time with the AI nexus, where people really needed to be reminded about the threat of nuclear weapons, because I think people do not have nearly enough fear of nuclear weapons. It's kind of forgotten as a solved issue and out of public consciousness, and it's not. It's not solved, and it's not over. And then counterintuitively, it was not a hopeful movie saying scientists are the heroes and they're going to solve everything. It was very neutral, and I think that allows us to kind of tell the story about what it needs to be for the future. And in my case, you know, I'm no Robert Oppenheimer. I wasn't as accomplished as him and did the things that he could do, but I can take, you know, my own actions to apply it to the world as I see it. And I'm not alone in that. A lot of people have made a difference, or activists, people who want to make a difference. Everybody in this room can all participate in shaping the future around this topic. So hopefully that's the result of the movie. It won't last forever. It's been helpful around the family name recognition, and then that our effort is to use that and try to kind of make sure the philosophy and my grandfather's real values get through to the world.
I think it looks like we could have continued for a while there, but we need to recognize the time, and I know your time particularly is precious and many demands on it. It's a fascinating discussion. I think we could have continued for a couple of hours and touch on many more issues, but these are important topics, and we've touched upon many aspects of both the nuclear weapons legacy, the future of nuclear power, and other applications, and the role of different nuclear communities in it. With that, please join me thanking Charles Oppenheimer and Director General Grossi for their time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.